Welcome to SoCal Sports Report's weekly podcast. I am John Stellman, back from a week in Arizona, during which time I was able to see a dreadful Angel game where they played nobody you've ever heard of or want to hear of. Here with Vince Morales, is going down, by the way, this weekend to see some Dodger action with John, who I believe might be already there.
He's not quite there yet, but he will be tomorrow. He's flying in tomorrow.
Okay, that sounds great. Let's go over the topics real quick, let everybody know where we're coming from. We'll lead with the NCAA tournament, and don't any of you out there tell me that you're 100% right now on your picks, because we all went down, I think, with Virginia's defeat. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the women's play, how the Pac-12 is doing in that. Look a little bit at the NIT tournament as well, men's and women's. Major League Baseball opens next Thursday. We'll talk about Justin Turner and his injury, as well as Andrew Haney. And next week we'll be giving our preseason picks, so you might want to be interested in listening to that. The Rams have done a pretty good job of upgrading their defense. We'll talk about that. The Chargers made a good signing in the center of their line, which should solidify that and perhaps keep Phillip Rivers on his toes a few more years. I want to touch on Augie Garrido, the legendary coach from Cal State Fullerton, who passed away surprisingly. I was shocked when I saw that. I knew Augie briefly when I was covering the Angels for the Register, but he was quite a guy and quite a coach, and we'll talk about Augie a little bit. And as usual, the NHL, Ducks and Kings right in the mess for that playoff positioning. I want to see both those teams get in, but it's just a scramble right now, and these last 9 games are really going to make a big difference. So we'll touch on that. Clippers are having a hard time. I don't know if they're going to be able to sneak in or not. They were a couple of games out of the final Western Conference playoff spot last time I checked. They're having a tough struggle, and we'll hope that they can pull some magic out of the hat here down the stretch. And the Lakers are just limping to the final finish after giving it a spurt there where they got to 31-36 was pretty encouraging. But they just don't have the bench right now with Ingram and Hart out. So let's get started. We'll go right to Vinny and let him give you his thoughts on the NC2A tournament to this point.
It's weird. I'll tell you that. I obviously, whenever a 16 beats a 1, it's an unusual year. But I think what we've seen is a parity that has been encroaching on this tournament for years, and it just never quite got there. And those 16 seeds were always the right teams in the 16 hole. There were not too many overachievers, but we just saw the absolute perfect bracket busting storm.
Unbelievable. By
UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, whose number one top alumna is Kathleen Turner. And it's pretty much of a drop off from there. It's a commuter school, and nobody's heard of it. And they have a great chess team. Who would have thought?
Is it in Baltimore? Where is it?
Baltimore County. It's near Baltimore, but it's not. It's in Baltimore County, but not Baltimore. Not in Baltimore.
Well, the thing I liked about that game was the fact that it wasn't one of those, you heave a half-court shot at the buzzer and win by a point, or there's a bad call, or an official makes a blunder. I mean, this thing was a thrash. It was a complete thrash.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, they blew them away.
I think everybody who has watched the tournament and all 136 or many of those 136 16 one-seed games thought the only way that it was going to happen was an underseeded team and an overseeded team going down to the wire, somebody missing free throws, right, exactly. Somebody hitting a big shot. This was, like you said, it was a thrashing. And Virginia just didn't know. They were like a deer in the headlights. Yep. UMBC was playing free and easy. They were hitting shots. They were putting pressure on the guards. And all of a sudden, Virginia, who likes to slow the pace down, didn't know what to do to get back in the game.
Right.
It felt like a team that just went up, like somebody who forgets their lines on stage.
Yeah,
There's just nothing you can do to help them. And I think Tony Bennett is a great coach, and I hope he's not judged, in his lifetime,
right, by that,
by the 40 minutes of floundering by his team. But he has to take some blame for not having that team
almost like they weren't prepared,
for not making the adjustments. I think there was a time when you felt like, wow, he's going to have to make some adjustments, and they just never happened.
Yeah.
And or the adjustments that he did make had no bearing on how that game ended up. But to lose by 20 as the number one seed, I mean, it's compounded. I mean, the historic nature of this game, of a 16 beating a 1, is compounded and sort of like exponentially by the fact that UMBC beat that team by 20.
Yeah, that's what I say. It wasn't a buzzer beater. It wasn't a free throw. It wasn't, a missed call by an official. It was just a drubbing at the.
Yeah.
I think haven't there been a couple of 15s who beat the 2?
Yeah, I think somebody beat Arizona when they were a 1 or a 2 seed. I think there has been 1 or 2 15 seeds, but it obviously goes up from there. The 10 over 7 and the 12 over 5, probably the most of the underdogs.
The thing too is, you had 4 number 1 seeds for the various regions. They were the number 1 nationally, the number 1
number 1 overall,
overall seed, which makes it even that much more impressive. Xavier also lost as a number 1,
and Cincinnati, who I loved, not a number 1, but a team that I picked to win it all. I thought their defense would hold them. Again, they run into an overachieving team, and Nevada was very good, and they weren't going to revert to that form that they had against San Diego State in the championship game of the Mountain West. That just wasn't that team. They had an injury to their point guard. Things were slowed down. San Diego State played a perfect half of basketball to get up by 30, and only the fact that they really tried to slow things down in the second half. Otherwise, Nevada Reno's press was just stifling. Exactly. And we saw that against Cincinnati. That Cincinnati team just did not know what to do with that pressure. They had no idea. And I think that the thing that everybody started scratching their head about is some of the big teams can be beat by the little guys when they pressure the guards. Pressure the guards. Now, when Buffalo beat Arizona, that coach came out and said, we knew we could pressure their guards. And essentially threw the whole Pac-12 under the bus, saying, pretty much, the subtext of it was, nobody in the Pac-12 knows how to play this team, essentially.
Exactly.
We knew to pressure their guards. We knew that their guards would crumble. Yeah. We knew that if we pressured their guards, they'd crumble.
And they didn't get that from film because nobody in the conference did it.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, everybody else was worrying about DeAndre Ayton, right? Being
exactly.
Looking at him as like, oh my God, a man among boys. This Buffalo coach was looking at it and saying, I think maybe, since he was an assistant under Bobby Hurley at Buffalo, maybe Bobby gave him some insights, gave him some tips.
Could be.
And said, look, if I had to do it again, here's what I'd do.
Right.
There had to have been something going on there because Buffalo knew exactly what to do. And they said, we don't need to take Ayton out of the game. If the guards can't get him the ball,
that's right.
We're in this game.
Yeah.
And they kept hitting some shots, and Arizona didn't, and no adjustments were made. But the Pac-12 stumbled and bumbled, and nobody's around.
Yeah, they only had Arizona in the 2 first 4 games that UCLA lost and Arizona State lost.
Right.
And now I saw a couple of days ago the restless alums at Westwood are already calling for Steve Alford's head after that performance against St. Bonaventure.
Yeah, it was dreadful. And again, I think that, John Adams and I talked about this last week, and that the decision to leave the Trojans out seemed punitive to me. It felt like we're not going to make an argument for this team because of their issues that they have going on. The FBI issues
Right. Yeah,
with Tony
exactly.
Bland in the preseason, and then with DeAnthony Melton not being made eligible, and then dropping out off the leaving the team, and then Chimezie Metu's name cropping up in some of those wiretap notes that were being leaked. I think the NC2A just said, we're not going to make a case for them. Because when we were talking about it last week, it's if you want to make a case for USC, and nobody else, it's real easy. USC, number 2 in the Pac-12 conference, number 2 in the Pac-12 tournament, a 37, strength of schedule,
Right.
33 or 34 RPI. You don't need to go any further than that. If you want to make a case for USC, that's your case. But if you don't want to coming in, and you decide not to coming in, and you're going to punish them because of the allegations, then that was a whole different story. They didn't even need to look at USC. They could make a case for Arizona State because they beat USC and had 2 wins against number 1s.
Right.
Number 1 seeds.
Right.
They could make a case for UCLA because UCLA beat USC twice and had a couple other big wins. So they didn't even have to make the case for USC. They just put them on the side, and they may say that they looked at them, but they didn't. I guarantee you they didn't. The NIT is exactly where the NC2A wanted that team.
Yep.
To punish them. And the Trojans didn't want to play in that game. The team had voted not to play in that game, but the administration had already said, you're playing. We've already filled out the paperwork. You're playing. And they couldn't back out. So Enfield coached that first game. He was an angry man. He was an angry man. And Chimezie, the coward, Metu, said F you to his friends and his brothers and sat that game out to save himself for the G League.
Right.
Terrible, terrible decision. All the good things and all the goodwill that he earned gone out the window because of that.
Right.
They still won that game in double overtime. But Enfield coached that game like he was angry, and then nobody showed up to watch that team.
Yeah. That's
the other night. They just didn't. Because USC barely cares about basketball. USC fans barely care about basketball, and they could not care any less about USC basketball in the NIT.
The NIT, right. Yeah.
So,
yeah, I saw prior to the selection show, I think something on the paper, 39 out of the 45 guys who were doing mock drafts all had USC in the draw. And so, they were pretty much expecting to get the NCAA pick. But you're right. I think they overpunished him on the Reggie Bush thing, and they overpunished him maybe on this as well.
yeah, it's again they sort of did the thing with Louisville, where they sort of the punitive thing where you knew Louisville wasn't going to get in because of the allegations there. They couldn't be helped with Arizona. Arizona had an automatic bid.
Right.
UCLA and Arizona State had virtually been, left out of those allegations, partly because, UCLA is an Under Armour team.
Right, exactly.
Not, or an Adidas, excuse me, as opposed to Under Armour, one or the other, whatever it is, Under Armour. And the allegations are coming through from, people affiliated with Adidas, I guess. It's a tough pill to swallow. Does Enfield return? McLaughlin leaving, Metu leaving. There's a good core of players there. It's just a matter of whether Enfield sticks around. I don't think there's much love lost between Swan and Enfield, both ways. I think reciprocally.
Well, yeah,
Swan is yet to really give Enfield a resounding vote of confidence, and then his decision with the administration to force them to go to the NIT.
Yeah, that's
was something that Enfield, I think, really bristled at.
Yeah,
his team had voted not to, and the paperwork was already filled out, and they made him go. So,
yeah, that's something that's doesn't bode well on either side. I kind of side with the team on that one. Well, in the women's NC2A, UCLA, Oregon State, Stanford, Oregon will all be playing in the regionals, the semis, the Sweet 16 this weekend. So that's something to look forward to. Although with UConn in that tournament, I don't think anybody's going to get a shot at
every
claiming
year.
that trophy.
Every year, you keep thinking, that their teams can't get any better, and it's probably the best UConn team ever.
Yeah. That's.
I mean, ever, right?
Yeah, and that's saying a lot. They've had great teams. They've had some great teams, but that team this year is. I don't look for anything like what happened to Virginia happening to UConn.
No, I don't think so. There will be no UMBC kryptonite for the UConn women in their tourney.
The only thing the Pac-12 has going now is the NIT, where Utah will be. They play tonight against St. Mary's, and the winner of that game will play Western Kentucky or Oklahoma State in the semis. So Utah's the last team standing in, Oregon, SC, Stanford, Washington, all went out of the NIT. So
yeah.
They're the last team standing, and I like St. Mary's a lot, though. St. Mary's might take.
It's interesting that of the West Coast, you've got the Mountain West, you've got Nevada, Reno, advanced, still hanging around, Sweet 16. You've got Gonzaga from the West Coast,
right?
USD, who lost their coach, has an interim coach taking them into that one of those lower tournaments. They're still playing.
They're still playing, yeah.
And St. Mary's, who had won 26 games or 27 games and had
a heck of a season.
Absolutely had an argument for being in the NC2A tournament. They're still playing, and they're still, it's a lower grade dance.
Yeah. But I'd like to see St. Mary's do a little bit. And we might as well mention that the Big West Women's Champion, UC Davis, is advanced to the third round. They play Kansas State on Friday. Not that anybody really cares.
I just going back to Gonzaga and St. Mary's. We're looking at that USD job, and they may end up giving it to an interim. But I was talking with a friend, and I thought that Dan Marley has done such a good job at Grand Canyon. Would he ever consider that job? And my buddy said, not if Gonzaga leaves, right? And so the everything is out there, inviting them into the Mountain West Conference, but all Gonzaga has is basketball. They're not a football conference. No, they don't play football. I don't know how that fits exactly. So I think in some ways Gonzaga has outgrown that conference, but I don't know that there's a good fit for them somewhere else, because most of the West, the bigger, the upgraded conferences from there all play football on the West Coast.
That would be the stumbling block.
Yeah, I think maybe if they were, folded into, the American, whatever conference, maybe. But I don't see the move to the Mountain West as something that could happen. But you'll never know until it happens, right?
You never know. I posed the question too on the topics. Questioning whether the Pac-12 is even a Power 5 conference. They were 1-8 in the bowl games this year. Utah was the only team that won a football bowl game, and their basketball teams have SC got a win. Anybody else? I mean, they were atrocious in the NC2A tournament. So maybe the selection committee is right in ignoring pretty much the Pac-12 when they make their bowl championship series selections and their seedings for the NC2A tournament.
I'll never agree with the NC2A tournament snubbing the Pac-12 per se, because if they made the argument that the Pac-12 isn't very good, then it doesn't matter that Arizona State beat a couple of number one teams in November. It just doesn't.
Right.
So things go in cycles. This was sort of the perfect storm of, a bad football season, postseason, followed by, a not so strong basketball season. A lot of injuries for the Trojans, who were a preseason number 10. Just some things that didn't quite, a lot of difficulties on the allegations at Arizona. Some young youth issues at UCLA. They'll be back. I mean, it was only a year ago that this team was sending Markelle Fultz, Kyle Kuzma, Lauri Markkanen,
exactly.
Lonzo Ball, guys like that to the NBA.
Good point. Yeah.
So, don't cry for them, Argentina. They'll be back.
Let's talk a little bit about spring training, which is about ready to wrap up. The season opens next Thursday.
I'll be there just under the gun to catch a few games.
Are you going down this weekend?
I'm leaving tomorrow night, driving out tomorrow night with a buddy, and then I'll meet up with all my other buddies.
Terrific.
There, so I'm going to miss the game tomorrow night, that the Dodgers Angels.
Okay.
That we have tickets for, but we'll go again. We'll have Friday and Saturday games, and I don't know. We're probably watching one Dodger game, one Angel game. I don't know who they're playing though.
I saw one game out there last week. I went to Peoria on Saturday and saw the Mariners shut out the Angels. But, it was the only guys they had in the lineup. Pujols played 5 innings at first base. Simmons DH'd. And Valbuena, who's not really a starter, played at third. And everybody else, even the pitchers, John Lamb started. Alvarez was the only pitcher of note that they used. And, they had 1 or 2 hits and lost 5-0, 7-0, something like that. So I was a little disappointed. I thought that close to the season, their starters would get a little more playing time, but it didn't happen. But, the games are meaningless anyway. They're just trying to give the kids a look, see if they're any good, see if where they're going to place them in the minor leagues, see if they might have a chance to stick with a big club. But you guys are, you should see some pretty good baseball out there this weekend.
I hope so.
Yeah. Justin Turner, that's
tough break.
That's a tough break. I think the Dodgers can probably recover from it a little bit better than anybody else would, just because of their bench and their versatility of their players.
Yeah.
You're not going to replace a Justin Turner.
No.
But a lot of teams who would lose a player of his caliber and what he contributes both in the clubhouse and on the field would just go right into the tank. I think the Dodgers will be able to survive. They say maybe 5 to 6 weeks. Wasn't a break, so it's just rehab and rest. But I think the Dodgers are in a better position because of the versatility and the depth in their farm system to withstand the loss for 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah, that was good news when Turner reported that he didn't have to be in a full cast and that he would be doing range of motion therapy on it within a week.
Yeah.
That's good news. But again, that's still time without swinging the bat. That's still time that he's going to be away from the game and is going to have to come back and shake the rust off. Turner had some of those issues coming into the season last year, some injury issues coming into the season last year. Seager as well, getting back up to speed because he had something like 16 at-bats all spring last year because of problems that continue to linger, and part of the reason why they were protecting Seager in the first half of spring training. He's starting to play now, but he hasn't gotten a lot of at-bats.
And he DH'd a lot.
And that showed a lot in his swing and in his play. It took him about a week before he was really fielding his position because he didn't take a lot of ground balls and he certainly wasn't throwing the ball. And he was, short-arming a lot of things in that first week of the season. So the Dodgers were a little bit behind last year as well. I think the question is now, does one door closing mean a door opening? And, what do the Dodgers do? They just keep more outfielders now because they can move Kike Hernandez into the infield and play him at third. And then that means that they don't have to make a decision, don't have to rush a decision on that whole, carousel that they've got out in left field with Tolles and Kemp and whether Trace Thompson, who is out of options, stays with the club. I don't think so. I think he's gone. I think he might get picked up somewhere, but I think the ship has sailed on Trace Thompson.
Yeah,
I think it's about done on Jock Peterson as well, though he offers a little bit more defense. Though his defense floundered last year after Puig ran into him and he was concussed. It just felt like he wasn't playing his fielding and playing his position the way that he should. I think the hitting was always going south and will likely continue to go south. He hasn't had a very good spring. But Tolles looks ready after his ACL tear. Kemp has come into camp 40 pounds
tremendous.
Under his playing weight with Atlanta, less wear and tear on the knees. That bodes well for them being able to put him out there, and he's got a National League body again.
Yes, right.
And and I think that helps. So the Dodgers may not keep somebody like a Jake Peter, who had 14 spring RBI last time I checked, and 3 or 4 home runs. Yeah. So, but he's not a long-term there. So Forsythe and I think Forsythe and Kike can handle things at the hot corner, and Utley and then Forsythe that they put him back over there. So I think against right-handers, it's probably Utley and Forsythe. And then against lefties, it's probably Forsythe and Kike at third, right? In the infield, and then the rest of it is just sort of rounded out. And I guess we'll see what happens. You've got sort of a natural platoon happening out there in left with Tolles, the left-handed stick, and Kemp, the righty stick, and it looks like things are just sort of par for the course with the starting rotation, with the relievers for the Dodgers. So it's a setback, but hopefully it won't diminish too much of what they're showing out there for the first few weeks until Turner comes back in the lineup.
I saw today that they sent Verdugo out, which I think is a great idea. He's got to go down to Oklahoma City, play every day.
Oh, he needs the at-bats. Yeah, he needs the at-bats.
Play every day.
There's no question. Especially with the log jam in left field, that's the right thing to do with Verdugo.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I was looking at what kind of flexibility they have, and Tolles is a guy who hasn't even played much in the other outfield positions and has never played even an inning at an infield position. So even though he sort of has that size and that feel and that look, you sort of think, wow, can we plug him in at third base or second base? No. Tolles is an outfielder and more specifically a left fielder, and that doesn't bode well. He's got a great stick. Will he have the kind of pop that they need out of that left field spot? They'll take some on base, but that could be a pretty good platoon with Tolles and Kemp.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to seeing it, and I hope Roberts doesn't tinker too much with it. In fact, I may get an opportunity to talk to him about that this weekend.
There you go.
John Adams and Dave Roberts are friends, so we'll see if
That's good. Is that good or bad?
No, they're good. They're buddies. John is very close friends with Dave's brother.
Okay.
So they know each other, and so
that's great.
We'll probably get to see him and shake hands with him, but if we have time, I'll give him my opinion on that left field platoon.
The Angels got some bad news with the inflamed elbow, Andrew Haney, but again, nothing serious. He was feeling pretty well. Doesn't look like definitely no surgery, and he may miss some starts at the beginning of the year and possibly be on the 10-day DL. But then again, the Angels, I think. They have the depth, and we'll see how it plays out. But they're already talking about either Parker Bidwell or Nick Tropiano filling in for his spot on the rotation. So there again, I think it's a tough break, but it's at a position where they do have flexibility and strength.
Yeah, I think the problem for me when I look at that rotation is I see a lot of width, but I don't see a lot of depth in the sense that those guys aren't going to go deep. They're not going to eat up a lot of innings. It's definitely a situation where a longer rotation seems in order, where more relief pitchers, a larger staff in general would probably help them. And again, I think that's all fine. Scioscia, cut his teeth in the National League, and so he knows how to sort of cobble that together. He's not your typical American League, and certainly not your typical old school American League manager who just sort of leaves a guy in there to bloat their ERA and chew up innings. That's not the way it works anymore. I think Scioscia's certainly not one of those type of managers.
You're only going to carry, I think, 3 bench players because they're going to have 7 or 8 relievers. They'll probably just get 6 innings out of the starter and see what happens.
Yeah, and again, like we've talked about that 10-day DL. It's just a carousel or a Ferris wheel of somebody gets to the top and gets does their start or their they're in the rotation, and then they're going the DL or something along those lines, and you just start cycling more guys in to get to fill in their spot in the rotation.
Any thoughts of what you've seen of Ohtani to this point?
We talked about it last week, John. I'm concerned that this is a guy who, if you compartmentalize it and you say pitching, he needs innings, but his elbow also needs to be, looked after. So they need to treat him with kid gloves. So you've got this sort of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, catch-22 thing going on where he needs more innings, but his elbow's not quite fit enough to throw as many innings as he probably needs to. So they've been getting him in and trying, but I didn't see any of the type of velocity that the legendary 100 touching 100, 3 digits on the gun. We have not seen that.
I haven't seen it.
We've seen 93, 94.
Right.
And, consistently 93 and maybe topping it out at about 95 or 96. That's still throwing hard, but that's not anywhere near the velocity that we were told he had in the Japanese league. That's a concern for me, and it's an indication that the elbow isn't quite 100% yet. So you put that aside, and then you start looking at him as a batter. He needs at-bats. At least, I think the consensus of experts and pundits and scouts is that he needs about 400 minor league at-bats. He's not going to get that many at-bats playing twice a week.
No.
He's not going to get a lot of at-bats doing that. If they think that they're going to throw him, and then he's going to sit, and then he's going to hit, and he's going to maybe pitch 1 game, and then maybe play 1 or 2 games. He's not going to get that kind of those at-bats under his belt for a long time. So to me, and Adams was saying last week, he thinks they need to decide, is he this or is he that? And I don't know that that's the case. I mean, he's so good prospect-wise, but I think that's the thing, is that you need to treat him like a prospect rather than a star who just a free agent star who needs to come in and produce. He needs to be treated like a prospect. And prospects play in the minors. They play and they pitch in the minors. And I think that that's something that could help him. And if he needs the at-bats, then he needs to go down there and get the at-bats.
Yeah, I don't... my expectations for him this year are not that high. I think a lot of people have high expectations. I think it's going to be a learning process. I think it's going to take time to figure it out, figure out the major leagues, figure out the rotation, figure out the adjustments. I look for him to have a good, solid year next year, but I don't think I'm not looking for big things out of him. This year.
So I mean, if you were the manager, you're the GM. Where do you start him? You start him with the big league squad, or do you?
I think you have to. I'm not so sure I would.
Let's say if there were no restrictions and no promises that needed to be kept, and none of that stuff. If all that was pushed away, where would you put him?
I'd probably start him in the minor leagues. He's making, he's not making a lot. He's making the major league minimum. You see, and another thing too. I know one of the reasons he signed with the Angels because they promised me to have a chance to hit, but I just. Like you say, I just don't see how working, a DH after he pitches and then his bullpen session, then another DH, then pitch. They can't very well now say, okay, you're going to be this or that. I think they promised him he'll get a chance to hit, but everybody would be up in arms if they sent him out, but I think he needs to spend probably half the year in the minor leagues.
The thing that would concern me in looking at it is, are you going to pitch him every sixth day, for instance? Well, now, do you consider him part of the starting rotation right now?
Yeah.
So he's going to go every fifth, right? They don't have the...
Well, right? They've got 6 starters.
Okay, so they got 6. So every fifth day, right? So, right, 6, whatever. Is he going to go every 6th day and play twice a week? I don't know. Has anybody asked Scioscia this? Right?
Oh, yeah. Like I say, the mistake they made was promising me would hit.
Yeah, I'm going to write that down. I'm going to see if I can get a word with Scioscia and ask him that question. What's your plan with Ohtani? How many times will he be on the field or on the mound total per week in the first month with the Angels in the majors?
It'd be interesting to see what he has to say.
We'll see. See if I can get his ear.
They could very well have, they decided on the 6-man rotation because of Ohtani, obviously. But even if he were sent out, they could still go with a 6-man rotation. I mean, I like a 6-man rotation. I like less innings, less pitches, less chances of injury, less wear and tear on the arm. I think the pitchers will last longer. They'll be stronger in September. I would like a 6-man rotation if they have 6 quality guys that can fill those spots.
I think here's my problem with it. My feeling about it with the 6-man rotation is, gosh, where does the stopper? If you get into a little skid where your 4, 5, and 6 guys are not giving you many innings and you're chewing up bullpen innings, it's another, if say that happens with your 4th starter, it's another 3 days before you get your stopper, right? Do the Angels have a stopper?
Yeah. Right.
Like a true, legitimate number 1?
Probably not. I mean, you don't. Garrett Richards can be if he's healthy, but we don't know if he's healthy.
We don't. We don't. So if you've got 6, if you've got 2 guys who are number 2 type starters,
right,
and then 4 guys who are not 1 or 2 type starters,
right?
What you have to go with that kind of setup. But what happens is that if somebody gets sharp, they can't stay sharp, right? So if a guy goes 7 innings, gives up a run, it's going to be 6 days before he pitches again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's hard. I mean, that's hard because then that consistency that you get, where like sometimes, and the Dodgers have done it for years, where it's like, okay, well, we're on a 2-game skid, but Kershaw's coming back.
Right. Exactly.
Right. You can get on. You can, so you couldn't get on more than like a 3 or 4 game skid, but here you could go on a 5-game skid before seeing your number 1 starter again.
A lot of things to think about.
Yeah.
A lot of things to think about.
But if you hit the ball and score runs, it's easier to handle.
I don't think the Angels are going to have a lot of problem scoring runs.
No.
I think they're going to, for the first time since before Josh Hamilton, they've got 3 solid guys in the outfield. Run producers, healthy guys. They get on base. I don't think they're going to have any problem.
Yeah.
I'm not real, like I said before, I was a Mike Moustakas fan. I wish they would have signed him to play third base, hit left-handed. We'll see what Cozart does. I don't think he's got the power for a third baseman. That's a power position. I'm not sure he's going to hit the home runs or drive in the runs that the third baseman should. I'll tell you what, I almost didn't recognize Albert last Saturday at first base.
He look good?
He was so thin. I mean, I said to my wife, who is that? He really looked good. He's in shape. It's his first rehab winter where he could do his regular, program without discomfort.
Right.
And he really looked, and he's hitting the ball hard. So
that's good news. I mean, he always hits the ball hard, but if he's able to stay in the lineup and and Pickett at first base. That, especially in the lineup with Trout and these guys around him.
Yeah,
that's good news. I mean, great news for the Angels.
I think 30 and 100 is very, very attainable for him this year, especially the guys he's going to have.
Yeah, even at his age,
ahead of him.
That's the kind of guy that he is, and healthy and fit should continue to be for at least a couple of years.
Yeah, you'd like to see him play more in the field than just
DHing.
Yeah, exactly. All right, next week we'll give you our World Series thoughts and pennant races. Let's look at the change gears and go to the Rams, who have really upgraded the defense. Any new word on is it Sue? Is that
Sue, Ndamukong Suh?
Yeah, I know they were talking to him. They had him in. They visited.
The only news was that he was also scheduled on this trip out to L.A. He was going to meet with the Raiders tomorrow, and that has been canceled. Okay. So it looks like the Raiders are out of the running for Ndamukong Suh. They run a 4-3 up there. It's a little bit different. I'm not sure that fits Sue well. I think he likes Wade Phillips. He likes the 3-4.
Right.
So the Rams are definitely front runners, but they've got to contest with the Titans and the Saints. The offers are in, and I think the writing was on the wall that he wasn't, that the Raiders weren't going to be able to make him the same type of offer,
right?
And that the defense was set up in a way, and then maybe he just doesn't want to play for a stickler like Gruden.
Yeah.
Maybe he wants to play for a young guy like McVay and somebody who is a defensive wizard in Wade Phillips. So we'll see. The Rams need to sign Aaron Donald. Sign Aaron Donald. Yeah. I keep saying it, and I will continue to say it.
Let's not have what we had last year.
Exactly.
But he and Sue together would be just monsters.
Yeah, and with Robert Quinn gone now to the Dolphins, I think it makes a lot of sense. They've really shored up things with Aqib Talib and Peters in the backfield. They re-signed Nickel Roby-Coleman. Things are looking very, very good.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and the defense wasn't. There wasn't that. I don't think it was as good last year as it was the year before.
No, there were some times when they gave up some points.
Yeah.
And I think some of that that I've talked about and we've discussed here is that some of that is just the learning curve on that 3-4.
Oh, yeah.
I think some of it was. And some of it is you play at a high pace, you give the ball back at a high pace, your defense is out there a little bit. Things like that will happen. So that's one of the sort of the disadvantages of having a high flying offense is you get a couple of big plays, you're in scoring position, and bang bang you're in the end zone, and then you're kicking off and the defense is back out
there again. Yeah. Plus they're playing a first place schedule this year. They're playing a first place schedule.
Yeah, they will be. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, that'll be. But I'm excited about football. I mean, baseball's about ready to start, but.
Well, this is for me, this is just a great time of year. Baseball's starting. The NFL season is starting with the draft. Postseason, March Madness is, is going. The Masters will be here in 3 weeks.
Plus the NBA playoffs.
NHL playoffs. It's all happening right now. This is a great time of year.
Yeah,
just
it really
a great
is.
time of year.
I had a thought and I've lost it. What was I going to say? Don't know. Anyway, the Chargers, I think, helped themselves with Mike Pouncey, the 2-year deal to move into the center spot. That's going to strengthen their interior and can't do anything but help the run game a little bit, I would think.
No, you'd think. For me, I want to see more of a splash, out of that team. I want to see bigger things. I want to see what happens during the draft. I want to see, because right now it feels like they're barely an LA team.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. They still haven't grabbed the attention of the city, really. They're going to have to do something this year to really, like you say, really, encourage the fans and, create some enthusiasm.
Yeah. I mean, unlike the Rams, where, they're back, they've been embraced. They have some stars, young stars in Goff and Gurley, defensive stars like Aaron Donald, again, pretty young. Homegrown guys like Robert Woods, wide receiver, who they've renegotiated his deal and reworked that deal to keep him after Watkins left. So, there are other things that we're probably, other wrinkles that we're going to see without a guy like Burn or like Watkins out there. McVay was talking about more tight end sets, more action with the tight ends, more receivers out of the backfield, just different looks. And I think that's the kind of thing that helps you continue to advance and progress after you've had such an excellent season. You won't be doing a lot of the same things, and you can sort of sneak up on teams again because you'll have a new look. And the Chargers are not going to sneak up on anybody. Is the part of the problem. They're just trying to build up the pieces, like you said, to keep Phillip Rivers off of his back until they can find his replacement and then make a splash.
Yeah. Getting back to the Rams, I really like McVay a lot. I mean, he's young, he's enthusiastic, innovative. He's not going to sit on this record last year, and he'll kick their butts in camp, and he'll move them forward. And like you say, new ideas, new looks, new gimmicks. He's not going to stand pat.
No, and the other thing is that, believe what you want about him being too young, or, what maybe some people thought he was too young, or maybe he got a little lucky because the Rams, changed some things, and so they snuck up on teams. He is a smart NFL
Very
mind.
smart.
He's an NFL legacy. It's in his blood. He's been around the game his whole life. So they're like dog years for this guy, because he's not somebody who just grew up liking football and then went to high school and college and then graduated and then got an assistant. No, this guy's he's seen how personnel deals are made, how practices are run, how things are done, and how offenses are put together. He's been doing that almost his whole life because of his father and his family. And so I think he's just an absolutely perfect pick, and that team will continue to grow, and I'm excited to see what happens, who they draft, and where they go.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's be a tougher schedule this year, but I still don't believe that it's going to have any effect. They're still going to be right in the hunt.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Augie Garrido, who got his start right here in Orange County at Cal State Fullerton, coached the Titans from 73 to 87, and then from 1991 to 2006. 1,975 victories, most
almost
by
2,000
any
wins
coach in NC2A history. And he produced a lot of major league ball players. Titans had 59 graduates who've gone to Major League Baseball, and among them were Justin Turner, Mark Kotsay, Jose Mota, who's doing the Angel broadcast, Phil Nevin, Tim Wallach. They all played for Augie Garrido. This guy was just a different kind of guy. He was a great guy personally. He was like a father. He was, he's always energetic, enthusiastic, and loved his players, loved the game, and he was just talked and slept baseball all his life. He was just a great guy.
An elevated and obscure Southern California program.
Exactly.
He won 5 national titles. There just are very few, and a bunch of titles when the guy up the road, Rod Dedeaux, was winning a bunch too. So, he wasn't doing that in a vacuum. I mean, he wasn't. It wasn't UCLA or USC or Arizona State. all those big time programs. He did it at Cal State Fullerton.
Yeah.
And by getting those types of players that you pointed out.
Well, Dado, of course, has 10 national titles, which is most ever, but Augie's got 5, and that's number 2.
Yeah.
And 3 of those, 97, 84, and 95 came with the Titans.
Right.
So, yeah, I was shocked when I read that story. I really, 79 years old. In this day and age, that's not really old, and I'm sure he was in pretty decent shape, but stroke or whatever.
Yeah, you just never know.
Never know.
But yeah, an absolute Southern California legend. It was unfortunate to lose him to Texas, but that kind of program and that stature of program, he was worthy of it. He had the experience and the expertise to fit into a legacy type of program at Texas, and he was the kind of guy who could do that, but also the kind of guy, like we said, who could build a program essentially from scratch.
Yeah, that Texas program was always a good program. He took it to another level, but still, he will be missed. He was a good guy. NHL. Every game's like a playoff game. Right now.
Yeah, that's what John Adams and I were talking about last week. It's the playoffs before the playoffs. Every game is critical. You're looking at things where, the Kings came back and won an important game last week where they're down 3-1 late and they tied it and then won it in overtime or in the shootout and were able to get a point, the other night.
Right.
And just all those are really just critical at this point.
Yeah.
And so,
they're both on the road right now. The Ducks are in Calgary tonight, and they play the Jets, who the Kings just played, I think, and the Oilers and the Canucks on the road. So and I think the Kings are on the road also 4 games. They basically have their destiny in their own hands. Both these teams, I'd love to see them both make the playoffs. It's
it's like we talk about, in basketball, you can't come down and have empty possessions. Here, you can't have 0-point games. You just can't. You gotta grind, and it's like the playoffs before the playoffs, right? Because the Kings play the Avalanche, who are right there.
Yep.
The Kings are 40-27-7. The Avalanche 40-25-8.
Yep.
It's going to be a barn burner every time they go out, and there's just it's the Kings at the Avalanche, and then Kings at the Oilers, and then they come home against the Flames, the Coyotes, and then they play the Ducks. That's going to be a huge game.
Yeah.
Huge game.
Yeah.
And then then they're home. They finished with their last 3 games at home: the Avalanche, the Wild, and the Stars. Nothing easy about that schedule.
No, it's going to be like you say. It's the playoffs before the playoffs. But I'll tell you what: whoever survives is going to be playoff tested. They're going to be ready.
Yeah, they'll be battle hardened. There's no question about that. Vegas continues to impress. They had a stretch where they were struggling a little bit, and we thought maybe that's the correction. But they're still on top of the Pacific with 99 points.
Yeah, they battled right back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't think they're going anywhere. So it'll be fun. To watch this last week and a half unfold.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Right now, it's Colorado and Anaheim are the wild cards, but not by much because LA has the last spot, but only by a point at this point.
Yeah, that's why those. Even a shootout loss at least gets you a point.
Gets you a point and keeps pushing you ahead there. So, those are critical. Yeah. Those are critical.
Like you say, you can't have any 0 games. You got to get points.
No, you got to get that tie in regulation.
Yeah.
And then hope you get the 2 points, and if not,
at
least you got the 1.
One's better than none.
Absolutely.
One's better than none. The Clippers are struggling. I don't know if they're going to. I don't know if they're going to make a playoffs or not. Now I think there were 2 games. Last I saw, there were 2 games out. The final playoff spot in the West. That might.
Yeah, last week when we were talking about it, they had the 8th spot, Yeah, but it was sort of tenuous. So
I think they've lost a couple, two or three in a row. But, yeah, I don't know whether they're going to sneak in there or not.
And let's take a quick peek here on where they actually are.
This is no time to go into a slump, go into a skid.
Right now they're tied for. They're in a three-way tie for 8th with Utah and Denver.
Wow.
Well, no, actually they're out. Now that I look at it, they're out of the picture by a game and a half. I'm sorry. So Utah's got the last spot, and they are currently 2.5 games up on the Clippers.
Wow.
And 2 up on Denver. So the Clippers have to jump Denver and Utah.
And Utah.
Yep, and then it's quite a drop off from there to the Lakers. But that's sort of the irony of that is that if the season ended right now, Lakers and the Clippers would be right there next to each other.
Yeah.
After everything that's happened. But who would have thought at this time last year that the Clippers would no longer have Blake Griffin or Paul George or Chris Paul, excuse me.
Chris Paul, yeah. That team, speaking of Chris Paul, that team is going to have the number 1 seed in the West the way I think they're 3 or 4 games ahead of the Golden State Warriors right now. Of course,
4 games up on the Warriors.
Yeah, the Warriors are injured, but still, how ironic that Mike D'Antoni once again surfaced with a run and gun offense that's might lead to a championship.
Anybody who says, Houston, they've got Golden State's number, I always say, just look down the bench. It's Mike D'Antoni.
Yeah.
It's Mike D'Antoni. He'll find a way.
Yeah.
He'll find a way to screw it up.
Plus, you still got to show me in the playoffs. They've got Harden, they've got Paul, but they don't have a lot of bench guys who have played under the pressure of the postseason.
Look, I understand the game has changed. 3-point shot is critical, but you still, the way that the playoffs are constructed and the timing and how there's timeouts and the longer timeouts and everything, it's all about possessions, right? So you have to defend. That you have to have half-court offense and you have to play good half-court defense. Houston can sometimes doesn't need to play half-court defense because their offense is so good. Whereas Golden State, you knew what you were going to get defensively. That team still played terrific. When we look back in 10, 15 years on that Golden State team, we're not going to say they were a bad defensive team or that they won despite their defense. We're going to say that was a pretty good defensive team.
Yeah.
And they had just enough grinders to get through it. I think that may be the issue. Do they have enough guys that can grind? Draymond Green type guys.
Right. It will be interesting. It's going to be fun down the stretch. I would really look forward to a Houston Golden State.
Absolutely. That's the way it should be. The top 2 teams playing, for the conference.
Yeah. What was the line early in the year on Vegas's line on the number of wins for the Lakers this season?
31, I think.
Yeah, that's right where they are now.
Yeah, right around there. Maybe a little less.
Yeah, they're 31. They were 31 and 36, and now they've lost 3 in a row. But they've got absolutely no depth with Ingram and Josh
they're
Hart.
Playing Tyler Ennis.
Yeah.
It's, again, and I think the thing for me that you look at is, can Lonzo Ball be a better shooter? We know what kind of facilitator. We know how he changes the pace of the game. We know he can start the transition by getting a steal, getting a rebound, moving it down the court. We know those things. But like I was saying to Adams last week, has any small point guard ever been inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame shooting less than 60% from the free throw line? No, of course not. So
I was going to say Bob Cousy until you said shooting less than 60% from the free throw line.
No,
never happened.
No, it just doesn't happen. Shaq wasn't a great free throw shooter, but he dominated. You can
Right.
excuse that.
Right.
But, the Hall of Fame is full of guys that make their shots. And I'm not sure that Lonzo Ball's ever going to be that guy. And that's what the Lakers wanted to be. That perennial all-star, that guy who is in the conversation about the type of player that he's going to be. And his dad clearly thinks he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. And then I start looking back and thinking, wow, we're building it around Lonzo, and we're building it around guys that aren't even here yet.
Right.
And I think the Clippers are going to have something to say about that. And the guy who we think we want to move to make room for the guys who aren't here yet, Julius Randle, is playing the best of anybody.
Yeah, I don't want to lose him.
Yeah. And now Isaiah Thomas says he wants to stay in LA. Now, again, I think that's part of him knowing that he's going to be a free agent. That's the kind of thing that other teams want to hear, that his agent is probably telling him to say.
Yeah.
That you're a team guy, you're going to play, you want to play, and to sort of refute any problems that you and
Exactly.
LeBron may have had,
Yeah.
knowing full well that he will consider coming here, for you to come out and say, yeah, I want to play here, is the right thing to do from an economic standpoint.
Politically correct.
It's politically correct, exactly.
Yeah.
But does he really want to stay here?
Yeah. I know he wants to start. He's playing a lot of minutes, but he's not starting.
He is a terrific player who, when he's 100% healthy from this hip thing, is going to be very good for somebody. I don't think that a shoot first guard is what this team needs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
It just isn't. And that's the thing that everybody coming into LA knows about Lonzo. He is absolutely and positively, because he is so pathetic from the free throw line and from behind the three-point arc, not a shoot first point guard.
Right.
He will distribute, he will facilitate, he will get you open on the break.
Do you think LeBron was impressed when with that game here a couple of weeks ago?
I watched that game and I was impressed, and LeBron had to be thinking, I'm impressed. Again, for me, it's one of those things where LeBron's smart, and LeBron knows that, hey, to make room for me, they got to get rid of that guy, Julius Randle.
Right.
And I think he knows that it's not quite the same team without Julius Randle.
Right.
There's going to be a big gap to fill, because Ingram's good, but he's not a big body. Lonzo's good, pretty good, but he's not a big body, right? Kuzma, lean. They don't have a lot of those big bodies. And LeBron's got to be thinking, oh my God, if they get rid of Randle and they don't re-sign Lopez, which they can't, and Isaiah's gone, who's going to bang? I'm going to have to be the one banging.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he wants to be a point forward, right?
Yeah, exactly.
At least that's part of the game.
Yeah.
Right? And he's bringing it up, and Lonzo's off ball. I think LeBron is smart enough to know that they're not going to guard him behind the perimeter. So part of LeBron's game is going to be gone, because he's going to have to dump it off to his point guard at some point.
Yeah.
They'll be able to switch it up. And I think that some of that, so LeBron is going to have to play like more of a true power forward at times with this team.
Yeah.
So I'm not convinced that he's coming.
I would almost rather sign Paul George, re-sign Randall, and worry about maybe Kawhi Leonard or Klay Thompson next year, if you can do that. But yeah, they're not going to re-sign Randall if they bring in LeBron and George.
But is Paul George enough? Is it enough to get you to the playoffs?
Well, he's a little bit younger than LeBron. I mean, LeBron's pretty. I mean, LeBron's a great player. I'm not going to discount that, but he's played a lot of minutes in a lot of games. He's been in the playoffs every year. He's been 7 games.
Yeah,
every
don't
year.
get me wrong. Paul George is great, but is he enough with this team, with a very young team?
Yeah, see, LeBron wouldn't come unless somebody else comes too. I don't think he's not going to. He's already pretty much made that.
Yeah, but the problem now with the NBA is with this luxury cap and getting under the cap and being able to sign people. It's pretty clear Isaiah Thomas won't be back. Brook Lopez likely will not be back unless he signs
gotta
for
take
a huge cut.
I'd like to see him take
and Julius Randle is the next big contract that they're trying to move, and it's not even a huge contract. I mean, they still have him signed for a bargain number,
right,
for what he's contributing.
exactly.
So for me, those are some critical pieces. They like Brook hasn't been great, but it's still a big piece because now you got to go out and find a forward, a center.
Yeah,
Maybe that's Bryant. Maybe that's Zubats.
yeah.
Maybe.
A lot of decisions to be made.
A lot of decisions to be
during the
made.
summer.
This is not a slam dunk. Laker fans need to understand. This is not a slam dunk, and there may be a lot of disappointment at the end of the free agency signing.
Yeah,
this summer.
Possible. Anything else?
Not for me.
Have a good time in Arizona.
Thanks. I'll report back on what Dave Roberts tells me about his platoon in left field.
And talk to Soch about Ohtani.
I'll see if I can get him.
We are out.
Good night.